Good afternoon, everybody. I have done a a live like this before, where I said talked about being an apostate in the Church of Antiracism, and it reminded me of it a couple of days ago when I had an interaction on Twitter with some of the sort of traditional anti-racist guilt, manipulation, and coercion. And I certainly believe that white supremacy and racism are great evils in global society, without a doubt. But I think the ideology of anti-racism as something separate from the actual belief that white supremacy and racism are great evils. The ideology of anti-racism, the way it's practiced, is essentially morally and ethically bankrupt, because the goal is individual conversion to their ideology through the use of coercion, manipulation, and guilt. And it's targeted at some of the least powerful people in our society, and it's not targeted so much at the more powerful people in our society. And the more powerful people in our society are savvy enough to learn how to speak the language of anti-racism without actually doing anything substantial about it. So, do I believe that somebody with retrograde racial views who has no power needs to be converted to anti-racism? No, absolutely not. Do I think they need to be checked if they're causing harm to others? Yes, of course, but that's with anything. Um, but do people need to buy wholeheartedly into the anti-racist ideology, which has concepts like whiteness and white privilege, and placing black women as the leaders on the sole identity that they are black women? Black women can be immoral. Black women can be unethical. The leaders of any community should be the people who are the most ethical and most moral people in that community, who can set the example for the rest of the community. And it doesn't matter what color they are. Should you listen to black women? Absolutely. You should listen to everybody. And you should listen to people you disagree with. You should listen to people who are not good people so that you can learn how to be a good person. But you should absolutely listen to everybody, and you should try to understand where everyone is coming from, whether it's a black woman, a redneck, a queer person, anybody. You should try to understand their history, who they are, what they want, and why they are saying the things that they are saying. So, yeah, I mean, but the the whole idea that the movement against racism and white supremacy is about the one by one individual conversion of people to wholeheartedly accept the anti-racist ideology is no different from Christianity trying to convert people from a sinful lifestyle. It's the same structure, function, rhetoric. It's just a different ideology. And it resembles very much a secular religion. The way to address white supremacy and racism is to have black led and black controlled institutions with power. It is not for white people to go into existing institutions and accuse people of white supremacy. It's not going to work, and it makes no sense. Um, can white people help black people building their own institutions? Sure, of course. White people can help, but they can't lead in those institutions. They have to be led by black people, and they have to be autonomous and independent of other types of institutions. They need to build their own networks. They need to have their own networks. They need to have their own funding avenues. They need to have their own power and their own institutions and their own control. And the way to get that is not complicated. it's land reform and reparations. It's 40 acres and a mule. It's the same thing it was after the end of slavery. It's the same thing that people wanted to happen with Reconstruction that didn't happen. That's the solution. It's not individual conversion of people to your culture and ideology. People are not going to do that. People are not going to abandon their culture and buy into your ideology. And I don't even know where that goes if it does happen. It doesn't lead necessarily or even maybe to black led institutions with power and money. And that's what needs to happen. That's what needs to be created is black led institutions with power and money. It doesn't, you don't need white people to believe this ideology for that to happen. You just don't. And look, at some point in movement spaces, we're going to have to embrace what I'm calling ideological pluralism. We're going to have to embrace, yes, anti-racism. If you want to be an anti-racist, I have no problem with that. Do your thing. I'm not going to do it. We're going to have to embrace communism. If communism is what you want to do your thing. I'm not going to do it. If anarchism is your thing, cool, go do it. But I'm not going to convert to your anarchism. I have my own ideology that I have developed over many, many years that I think works for me and my community. And most ideologies need to be centered in a particular community that is relevant and tangible to the people in that community. It doesn't need to be an overarching centralized ideology that everybody has to buy into. And that's what I mean by ideological pluralism. Decentralized ideologies, decentralized institutions, work in place, work where you are at, and develop ideologies that are relevant to the work you're trying to do where you're at. And leave people alone who are trying to do that. Like, everybody doesn't have to be the same. Everybody doesn't have to be the same. And just because you think that your ideology is the be all and end all of everything, and that's the only way to solve racism and white supremacy, doesn't mean that everybody's going to agree with you, because everybody's not going to agree with you. And we're going to have to come to some sort of understanding that everybody's not going to agree. Like, ideological unanimity is a fool's errand. And when you want ideological unanimity, all you end up with is organizations that end up bickering internally over who is the most pure ideologically. So the best thing to do is to build institutions, do work, serve the community, be a decent human being, be ethical, have compassion, and recognize that it's a complicated world and that not everybody can agree. And we'll see y'all next time. Peace, y'all.